The Grand International Tech Expo was abuzz with excitement as representatives from Earth's nations gathered alongside visitors from across the galaxy. The vast convention center was a hive of innovation, with displays ranging from sleek Earth-made vehicles to alien technologies that defied human understanding. Alex, a young engineer, was making last-minute adjustments to his display, a compact energy device that was simple yet revolutionary by human standards. As he tinkered, his friend and fellow engineer, Marco, approached with 2 steaming cups of coffee. "Nervous about the big reveal?" Marco asked, handing a cup to Alex. "More excited than nervous," Alex replied, smiling. "This could change the way we look at energy storage and deployment." The murmur of the crowd grew louder as a group of alien delegates entered the exhibition hall. Among them was Lyra, her stature regal and her demeanor marked by a quiet confidence. She and her compatriots paused at various displays, their expressions ranging from amused to unimpressed. When they reached Alex's booth, Lyra's gaze lingered on the modest device. "Is this it?" she asked, her voice carrying a hint of mockery. "Your species' pride is this primitive tool?" Alex met her gaze, his expression calm. "It's more than it appears. Would you like a demonstration?" Lyra smirked, crossing her arms. "Please, enlighten us." Gathering a small crowd, Alex activated the device. With a press of a button, the air filled with a soft hum as the device powered up. The onlookers leaned in, their skepticism palpable. "What are we waiting for?" Lyra inquired, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Just a moment," Alex assured her as he adjusted a dial. Suddenly, the device emitted a bright pulse of light, illuminating the entire hall in a dazzling array of colors before settling into a steady, powerful glow. The crowd gasped, and Lyra's mocking smile faltered. "How?" "It converts ambient thermal energy into a stable, clean power source," Alex explained, his eyes never leaving the device. "It's efficient and more powerful than it looks." Marco chimed in, "It's designed to be adaptable to various technologies, including yours, potentially." Lyra's eyes shifted from the device back to Alex. "Impressive," she conceded, her tone softer now. "Perhaps there is more to human technology than I assumed." As the crowd dispersed, Lyra lingered, her curiosity piqued. "I must admit, your invention has merits. Tell me more, Alex. How did your kind come to develop such a device?" Alex smiled, sensing an opportunity not just to showcase his work but to bridge a gap between 2 vastly different cultures. "It started as a small project during my university days," he began, eager to share not just the specifications of his invention but the story of human innovation behind it. Marco watched the exchange, a grin spreading across his face as he saw Alex engage with Lyra. It was clear that this expo was not just a display of technology, but a meeting point of minds and possibly the beginning of a groundbreaking alliance. Chapter 2: The Demonstration. Later that day, the exposition's main auditorium buzzed with anticipation as attendees gathered for the scheduled demonstration of Alex's energy device. The room was packed, a mix of human and alien visitors craning their necks for a better view. Alex, alongside Marco and their new team member, Jensen, a seasoned engineer known for his expertise in scalable energy solutions, made final preparations on stage. Jensen, checking the connections on the larger prototype, turned to Alex. "All set on your end?" Alex nodded, his focus sharp. "We're ready. Let's show them what it can really do." Marco, ever the showman, addressed the crowd, warming them up. "Ladies and gentlemen, and esteemed guests from across the stars, thank you for joining us today. What you're about to witness is not just a demonstration of a device but a leap forward in energy technology." Lyra, seated in the front row with other alien dignitaries, watched intently, her earlier skepticism replaced by a cautious interest. Next to her, her aide whispered something in her ear, but she kept her eyes fixed on the stage. "Jensen, if you would do the honors," Marco said, stepping aside to give Jensen the spotlight. With a confident nod, Jensen activated the device. The hum from earlier in the day returned, but this time it steadily grew in intensity, the device's core glowing brighter with each passing second. Using ambient heat, this device not only stores but multiplies energy output without any degradation to its core components. Jensen explained, his voice clear over the murmur of amazement. It's modular, meaning it can be scaled up for industrial use or scaled down for personal devices. The audience murmured their approval as the display screens showed real-time data of the energy output, numbers climbing higher than any traditional source currently in use. Lyra stood, her eyes not leaving the device. "How do you manage overheating?" she asked, her tone now completely devoid of mockery. Alex joined Jensen, ready to answer. "Great question. We use a superconductive material unique to Earth, integrated into the core. It channels heat away efficiently, which prevents any potential overheating." Lyra nodded, visibly impressed. "Ingenious," she admitted, and her acknowledgement sent a ripple of whispers through her delegation. Encouraged by Lyra's interest, Marco invited her and her team to the stage. "Perhaps you'd like a closer look? We value your perspective and would be honored to discuss potential applications or improvements." As Lyra and several of her technical advisors ascended the stage, Alex and his team led them through the device's mechanics, demonstrating the easily replaceable parts and the fail-safes built into the system. One of Lyra's advisors, an engineer himself, exchanged ideas with Jensen. "Could this adapt to our energy interfaces? Our systems operate on a different spectrum of thermal energy." Jensen, intrigued by the challenge, responded eagerly. "Absolutely, we can adjust the input parameters to match your systems. It's designed to be universally compatible." As the demonstration concluded, the crowd applauded, not just for the technology but for the evident bridge being built between human and alien expertise. Lyra shook hands with Alex, her expression one of respect. "Alex, Jensen, Marco," she said, addressing each by name. "Your work is commendable. I look forward to sharing insights and perhaps collaborating on future projects." As the group disbanded, Marco leaned in to Alex and Jensen, a broad smile on his face. "Well, I'd say that went rather well." Alex laughed, relief and satisfaction mingling in his expression. "More than well. Let's get ready for the next steps. It looks like we've just opened up a whole new realm of possibilities." Together, the team watched as the audience dispersed, discussing the potential of new partnerships and the future of interstellar cooperation, fueled by human innovation and a newfound alliance. Chapter 3: Unlikely Pair. Later that evening, Alex and Marco found themselves sitting at a small cafe just outside the exhibition hall. The bustling energy of the expo was replaced with the quieter hum of conversation and the occasional clinking of cups. Jensen had headed back to the hotel to review data from the demonstration, leaving Alex and Marco to decompress. "That was one hell of a presentation," Marco said, leaning back in his chair. "I mean, did you see Lyra's face when you explained the heat dispersion tech? She actually looked impressed." Alex stirred his coffee absently, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. "She did seem genuinely interested. I wasn't expecting that." "Neither was I. But it wasn't just her. The entire alien delegation seemed to be paying closer attention. I overheard one of her advisors saying something about running simulations back on their ship." Before Alex could respond, a shadow fell over their table. They looked up to see Lyra herself standing there, her arms crossed loosely, her expression neutral but curious. "May I join you?" she asked. Marco shot Alex a look before gesturing to the empty chair. "Please, be our guest." As Lyra settled into the chair, Alex tried to gauge her mood. She wasn't mocking him like before, but her gaze was sharp, as if she were trying to read him. "That demonstration earlier," Lyra began. "It was more effective than I anticipated. I was wondering if you might elaborate further." Alex glanced at Marco, who nodded slightly as if to say, "Go ahead." Turning back to Lyra, he leaned forward. "Sure. What would you like to know?" "For one, the material you mentioned, the superconductive component. Is it something unique to your planet? And if so, why haven't other species discovered it?" "It's a naturally occurring element on Earth, but its superconductive properties are only unlocked under certain conditions," Alex explained. It took years of research to figure out how to harness it efficiently. As for why others haven't discovered it, maybe it's not present on other worlds. Or maybe the conditions required to identify its potential just don't come up often. Lyra tilted her head. Fascinating. You mentioned adaptability earlier. Would this device be capable of integrating into existing infrastructure on a wide scale? Or would it require a complete overhaul? That's a great question, Marco chimed in, eager to join the discussion. We designed it to be as plug-and-play as possible. In most cases, it can connect to existing systems with minimal changes. That was one of our main goals, making it accessible rather than forcing a complete rebuild. Lyra nodded, her initial skepticism giving way to what seemed like genuine curiosity. And the energy output, she continued, it scales? So you could power something as small as a personal communicator or something as large as a starship. Exactly, Alex said. That's what makes it unique. It's not just about raw power, it's about flexibility. They spoke for another hour, diving deeper into the mechanics of the device and the challenges Alex and his team had faced during its development. Marco and Alex shared stories about late nights in the lab, unexpected setbacks, and the thrill of finally seeing their ideas come to life. Lyra listened intently, occasionally asking questions or offering insights from her own experience. As the conversation went on, her demeanor shifted from reserved and analytical to more relaxed. The formal boundary that had existed between them earlier in the day seemed to dissolve. At one point, Marco leaned forward with a grin. So, Lyra, what's it like working on a delegation like yours? I imagine the pressure to impress is pretty high. Lyra smirked. You could say that. It's not every day that you meet a species with such a different approach to technology. My colleagues and I spend most of our time analyzing, comparing, and occasionally admitting that we have something to learn. Today was one of those occasions. Her candid admission caught Alex off guard. He smiled, feeling a strange sense of pride, not just for his invention, but for the fact that it had opened a door to understanding. Well, Marco said, lifting his cup in a mock toast. Here's to unexpected lessons. Lyra raised an eyebrow but eventually mirrored the gesture, lifting her own drink. To lessons, then. The three of them continued talking until the cafe began to wind down for the night. By the time they parted ways, a tentative camaraderie had begun to form. Alex couldn't help but feel that something had shifted, not just in their professional dynamic, but on a personal level as well. As they walked back to their hotel, Marco clapped Alex on the shoulder. See? Told you she wasn't so bad. I think she actually respects you now. Alex chuckled. Maybe. It's still hard to tell. Well, keep at it, Marco said. Who knows? You might just end up learning more from her than she learns from us. Alex nodded thoughtfully. Maybe. With that, they continued their walk, their thoughts filled with the possibilities ahead. New collaborations, new challenges, and perhaps, new friendships. Chapter 4, Growing Closer. The next morning, Alex met Marco in the hotel lobby. Jensen was still upstairs, buried in data analysis, so it was just the two of them. They grabbed quick coffees from the cafe bar and made their way toward the expo's outdoor exhibits. It was the first clear day of the event, the sun casting long, warm shadows over the displays. I thought you said you weren't a morning person, Marco teased as Alex sipped his coffee. I'm not, Alex replied. I just couldn't sleep. Too much going on upstairs. He tapped his temple. Marco nodded knowingly. Yeah, yesterday was a lot. Still, you handled yourself well. Even Lyra seems interested now. Alex smirked. Interested in the tech or just interested in poking holes in it? Does it matter? Marco shrugged. If she's asking questions, it means she's thinking about it. That's more than most of the other delegates are doing. As they walked, Alex noticed Lyra standing near a garden of alien flora that had been cultivated for the expo. She was studying the strange, glowing plants, her hands clasped behind her back. There she is, Marco said, nudging Alex with his elbow. Want me to wingman? Alex chuckled. You'd make it worse. I'll talk to her. Suit yourself, Marco replied. I'll be over there checking out those gravity turbines. Alex approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. Lyra glanced over her shoulder, spotting him before he could say a word. "Ah, Alex," she said, turning to face him. "What brings you out so early?" "Couldn't sleep," he admitted. "Too much to think about." "What about you?" Lyra gestured toward the plants. "Curiosity. These were cultivated from seeds brought by my people. They thrive here, even in an environment so different from their homeworld. It's unexpected. Kind of like how some ideas flourish under the right conditions," Alex said, stepping closer. "Even if the environment seems totally wrong at first." She tilted her head, a faint smile touching her lips. "Are you comparing my people's flora to your technology?" "Maybe," he said with a small grin. "Or maybe I'm just trying to sound clever." Lyra chuckled softly. "Well, you've succeeded. Tell me, Alex, do you always approach unfamiliar situations with such optimism?" "Not always," he said honestly. "But I figure it's better than the alternative. Besides, yesterday gave me some hope that our work might actually matter to someone beyond Earth." Lyra regarded him quietly, her gaze thoughtful. "It's rare," she said finally, "to meet someone who views the unknown as a challenge rather than a threat." "Guess I'm just stubborn that way," Alex replied. They walked together through the exhibit garden, their conversation shifting to lighter topics: cultural differences, their favorite foods, even the peculiarities of each other's languages. Lyra explained a bit about her homeworld's traditions, while Alex shared stories of late-night experiments and engineering mishaps. "I remember one time," Alex said, grinning. "Marco and I stayed up all night trying to fix a calibration error. Turned out we had the settings off by a single decimal point. Took us hours to figure it out." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "That must have been frustrating." "It was," Alex admitted, "but also kind of funny in hindsight. Sometimes the smallest details end up making the biggest difference." Lyra nodded. "That's true in many things. Attention to detail often separates success from failure." They paused by a small fountain that had been designed to mimic flowing liquid metal. The light refracting off its surface created shifting patterns on their faces. "Your team," Lyra said after a moment. "You work well together. It's different from how our delegations function." "How so?" Alex asked, leaning against a low railing. "We tend to operate in strict hierarchies," Lyra explained. "Every individual has a defined role and deviations are rare. Your team, on the other hand, seems more flexible. You each contribute in your own way, without rigid boundaries." Alex thought about it. "I guess we're used to improvising. When things go wrong, you have to adapt. Maybe that's why we approach problems the way we do." Lyra's gaze lingered on him, as if she were seeing him in a new light. "I think I'm starting to understand why your invention is so unusual. It's not just the technology, it's the mindset behind it." "Maybe," Alex said, rubbing the back of his neck, "but it wouldn't mean much if you hadn't given it a chance." She smiled faintly, her earlier skepticism nowhere to be found. Sometimes, unexpected encounters lead to unexpected outcomes. Marco's voice broke the moment. "Hey, Alex, they're setting up the hover array. You should come check it out." Alex glanced at Lyra. "Want to join us?" She hesitated briefly before nodding. "I'd like that." Together, they walked back toward the main exhibit area, their pace easy and unhurried. Marco grinned as they approached. "Didn't scare her off, huh?" Alex shot him a look. "Don't start." Lyra laughed softly, surprising both of them. "I think I can handle a bit of teasing." They spent the rest of the morning exploring the exhibits together, the tension of their first encounters replaced by a comfortable camaraderie. Alex and Lyra's interactions grew more natural, their shared curiosity forming a foundation for what might become a genuine friendship, or perhaps something more. Chapter 5: Cultural Revelations. It was the fourth day of the expo, and the organizers had arranged an intercultural seminar, a gathering where human and alien representatives would share their philosophies, histories, and societal structures. The massive conference room was packed with spectators and participants, eager to witness this unprecedented exchange of ideas. The stage was set with a circular arrangement of seats, each occupied by a delegate who would share their perspective. Alex and Marco had arrived early, staking out seats in the middle rows to get a clear view of the discussion. Jensen, ever the data enthusiast, had chosen to remain behind at their booth, updating their system readouts. "This should be interesting," Marco said, glancing at the diverse group on stage. "Think anyone's going to bring up the whole 'we're the newcomers' thing?" "Probably," Alex replied. "It's hard to avoid when we're the only species here that's just recently started mingling with the galaxy." Before the seminar began, Lyra entered the room, her presence commanding attention. She didn't walk directly to the stage. Instead, she approached Alex and Marco, standing just beside their row. "Gentlemen," she said, nodding, "are you prepared for today's exchange of ideas?" Marco grinned. "As ready as we'll ever be. Do you know who's speaking first?" Lyra glanced toward the stage. "One of my colleagues. He's known for being direct in his assessments. I hope your representatives are ready for some pointed questions." "I'm sure they are," Alex said, his tone calm. "The whole point of this seminar is to challenge each other's assumptions, right?" Lyra raised an eyebrow. "It's refreshing to hear someone embrace the concept of constructive conflict." Marco chuckled. "We humans do tend to argue a lot, but we like to think it's part of our charm." Lyra tilted her head, a hint of amusement on her face. "I'll reserve judgment on that." The seminar began with a human historian giving a brief overview of Earth's cultural diversity and the ways in which different nations had come together, sometimes through conflict, other times through cooperation, to create a. As the historian spoke, Alex watched Lyra's reaction. Her expression remained neutral, but her sharp eyes betrayed her active interest. When it was her colleague's turn to speak, he introduced himself with a curt nod and launched into a detailed analysis of his people's social structure. He spoke of hierarchies that had existed for millennia, with each level of their society serving a distinct purpose. Individualism, he explained, was seen as secondary to the needs of the collective. When he finished, a human sociologist seated nearby offered a counterpoint. "While your model emphasizes order and efficiency, it also raises questions about personal freedoms. How do individuals express creativity or challenge established norms if everything is predetermined?" Lyra's colleague responded firmly. "Our system ensures stability. Creativity, when channeled through appropriate channels, still flourishes. And challenging norms? That is not the foundation of progress. It is the foundation of chaos." Marco leaned toward Alex. "He's not pulling any punches, is he?" "Not at all," Alex whispered back. "But he has a point. Stability does have its advantages." As the discussion continued, a human engineer described how Earth's fragmented past had forced its inhabitants to innovate in unpredictable ways. "Our diversity isn't just cultural," he said. "It's technological. Each nation, each region developed different approaches to similar problems. That constant exchange of ideas, even when it was contentious, pushed us further." Lyra, who had remained silent throughout, finally raised her hand to speak. "If I may," she began, her voice cutting through the low murmurs of the crowd. "What you describe is fascinating. A tapestry of conflicting ideologies that somehow yields progress. But does it not create instability? How does one know which direction is correct when so many voices are shouting at once?" The human engineer paused before answering. "It's true that our approach can seem chaotic, but the key is balance. Over time, the strongest ideas tend to rise to the top. It's not about silencing the voices. It's about learning from all of them." Lyra seemed to consider his words carefully, her expression softening. "And what role do individuals play in this process? Are they simply cogs in a machine, or do they drive the machine itself?" Alex couldn't stay silent any longer. "Individuals are more than cogs," he interjected. "We're the ones who dream up the solutions, test them, fail, and try again. We drive the process forward, even if it's messy. And sometimes, it's that messiness that leads to breakthroughs." Lyra looked at him directly, her gaze thoughtful. "Interesting. Perhaps there's value in chaos after all." Marco chuckled. "See? I told you we were charming. The seminar continued for another hour, with representatives from various alien cultures sharing their perspectives. By the end, it was clear that no one system was perfect, and no single approach held all the answers. But it was also evident that this exchange of ideas, however heated at times, was a necessary step toward mutual understanding. As the crowd dispersed, Lyra approached Alex and Marco again. Your people's way of thinking is unusual, but I see now why it's effective. Well, thanks, Alex said, scratching the back of his neck. I think, Marco grinned. You'll get used to us. I look forward to seeing where this dialogue leads, Lyra said, her tone genuine. Perhaps there is more we can learn from each other. As she walked away, Marco nudged Alex with his elbow. I think she likes you, buddy. Alex rolled his eyes. She likes our ideas, not me. Sure. Keep telling yourself that, Marco said, his grin widening. Come on, let's go find Jensen. I'm sure he'll have a ton of notes on this session. Together, the two of them left the hall, the echoes of the seminar's spirited discussions still buzzing in their ears. Chapter 6. The Incident. Alex and Marco were running late. After the cultural exchange seminar, they had been roped into another round of Q&A about their device, and by the time they wrapped up, the next demonstration was already starting. They rushed down the polished corridors of the Expo's high-security wing, Jensen trailing behind, balancing a stack of tablets. We're definitely missing the intro, Marco muttered as they approached the reinforced doors. Better late than never, Alex replied, scanning his pass. The doors slid open, revealing a spacious laboratory filled with attendees, most of them clustered around a large piece of alien technology that pulsed with a faint blue glow. Jensen nodded toward the display. That's their energy regulator prototype. Apparently, it's supposed to stabilize power outputs on an unprecedented scale. Alex glanced around, noticing Lyra among the alien delegates. She was standing near the regulator, speaking in hushed tones with one of her engineers. When her gaze flicked to Alex and his team, her expression briefly softened before returning to its usual composed demeanor. Looks like we're not the only ones under scrutiny, Marco said, nodding toward Lyra. She doesn't seem thrilled to be here either. Before Alex could respond, a sharp buzz filled the room. The alien engineers stepped back from the regulator, their movements hurried. Lyra's aide whispered something in her ear, and she nodded, her features tightening. A moment later, the lights in the room flickered. That's not good, Jensen muttered. He moved closer to Alex. Their regulator isn't stabilizing. It's overloading. What's the procedure for something like this? Alex asked. Marco glanced around. I don't think they have one. Look at their faces. Indeed, the alien engineers seemed unsure, their usually precise gestures growing frantic. Lyra stepped forward, raising her voice over the rising hum. Containment Protocol 1. Activate the secondary array. One of her technicians pressed a sequence of buttons, but the regulator only glowed brighter. The hum became a roar, and the floor beneath them vibrated. Alex turned to Jensen. Can our device help? Could it absorb the excess energy? Jensen hesitated, then shook his head. It wasn't built for that kind of surge, but we might be able to redirect the output. Lyra overheard and approached quickly. Redirect it where? If the discharge isn't controlled, it could destabilize the entire wing. Alex glanced at Marco. If we connect it to the Expo's central grid. Are you insane? Marco interrupted. You'll blow the whole Expo. Not if we balance the load, Alex insisted. If we can buy time, we can help them shut it down properly. Lyra studied him, then nodded sharply. Do it. We'll stabilize from our end. Jensen, Alex said, run the bypass protocol and get me a direct connection to the grid's balancing node. Marco, help me bring the backup interface online. The three of them worked quickly, with Marco connecting the necessary cables while Alex adjusted the device's parameters. Lyra returned to her team, relaying instructions with a calm authority that belied the urgency of the situation. The hum from the regulator reached an almost deafening level. Marco handed Alex the final cable. Here goes nothing. Alex plugged it in, and the room dimmed as the energy redirected. Their device took on a visible glow, its core spinning rapidly. On the alien side, Lyra's engineers continued to fine-tune their settings. Slowly, the vibrations underfoot began to subside. Lyra rejoined them, her tone still sharp. The output is stabilizing. Whatever you're doing, it's working. We're shifting the load across multiple nodes, Jensen explained, his fingers flying across his tablet. It's not a permanent solution, but it's giving you time. One of Lyra's engineers called out, regulator output is within safe levels. The core is stabilizing. Lyra let out a breath. Good. Maintain those levels until we can recalibrate the primary array. As the hum faded and the lights returned to their normal brightness, the room fell silent except for the murmurs of the relieved crowd. Lyra turned back to Alex and his team. You just averted what could have been a catastrophic incident. How did you even know that would work? Alex exchanged a glance with Marco and Jensen. We didn't, he admitted. But we saw a way to give you time and took the chance. Lyra's expression softened. That was reckless, but effective. Marco gave Alex a half-smile. Looks like our chaos paid off. Lyra crossed her arms, though her tone was less harsh than usual. I'm beginning to see that improvisation has its place. Your methods are unorthodox, but they worked. We couldn't have done it without your team stabilizing the core, Alex said. It was a group effort. Lyra nodded, as if acknowledging that she wasn't the only one who had grown to respect her counterparts. Indeed, perhaps we have more to learn from each other than I initially thought. As the technicians began packing up their equipment, the tension in the room gave way to a cautious optimism. Alex and his team stood by their device, quietly proud of what they'd managed to accomplish. Jensen clapped Alex on the shoulder. Looks like your crazy idea saved the day. Alex smiled. Let's just hope we don't have to do that again anytime soon. Lyra glanced at them one last time before turning back to her team. You've earned my attention, she said. I'll be in touch. As she walked away, Marco leaned toward Alex. I think she's starting to like us. Alex rolled his eyes, but he couldn't suppress a small grin. Let's just hope our next collaboration isn't quite so explosive. Chapter 7, Mutual Admiration. The following afternoon, Alex, Marco, and Jensen sat together in one of the quieter wings of the expo, reviewing the incident from the day before. Despite their success in stabilizing the alien regulator, the ordeal had left them exhausted. Marco leaned back in his chair, balancing a cup of coffee on his knee. You know, he said, glancing at Alex, I think that might be the first time I've ever seen you sweat during a demonstration. Alex chuckled, shaking his head. It wasn't a demonstration. It was a full-on crisis. There's a difference. Still, you handled it pretty well, Marco said, flashing a grin. And let's not forget Lyra. She actually looked impressed. That's not something I thought I'd ever see. Jensen, absorbed in his tablet, didn't look up. It was a solid collaboration. We improvised, they adjusted. No one blew up. I'd call that a win. Alex sipped his coffee thoughtfully. I think she's starting to see that we're not just scrambling around blind. There's a method to our madness. Marco raised an eyebrow. Our madness? Speak for yourself, buddy. Before Alex could respond, Lyra approached from across the room, her usual composed expression softened by something resembling curiosity. She carried a small data slate and gestured toward an empty chair. May I join you? Alex nodded, and Marco slid his coffee cup to the side, making space. Of course. Good to see you again, Lyra. She settled into the chair gracefully, placing the data slate on the table. I've been reviewing the readings from yesterday. Your approach was unconventional, but it worked. I'd like to understand it better. Well, Alex began. We recognized that the energy overload needed a place to go. Our device isn't just a generator, it's also a buffer. It can absorb and redistribute excess energy, which gave you the time to recalibrate your regulator. Lyra tapped the slate, pulling up a series of graphs. These are the energy signatures during the incident. Your device's output shifted dynamically, as if it were anticipating the fluctuations. That's Jensen's handiwork, Marco chimed in. He set up a reactive algorithm that adjusts on the fly. Jensen looked up from his own tablet, nodding. It's not perfect, but it's designed to respond to sudden spikes and troughs. In this case, it bought us enough time to stabilize the situation. Lyra regarded them all for a moment, her gaze thoughtful. You don't follow traditional protocols, yet you achieve results that many would consider improbable. It's impressive. Impressive wasn't a word Alex had ever expected to hear from Lyra. He glanced at Marco, who raised his eyebrows in mock surprise, and then at Jensen, who simply gave a small, satisfied smile. It's just a different way of looking at things, Alex said. We work with what we have, adapt quickly, and figure it out as we go. Sometimes that means bending the rules. Sometimes, Marco teased. Try most of the time. Lyra's lips quirked in what might have been the beginnings of a smile. It seems that adaptability is your strength. Your willingness to adjust in real time is something my people are not accustomed to. We rely heavily on predetermined protocols. Yesterday, I saw firsthand the value of improvisation. Alex nodded. It's not always pretty, but it gets the job done. I think there's something to be said for combining our approaches, taking the best from both sides. Lyra tilted her head, considering his words. A hybrid method. Interesting. Perhaps you're right. For the next hour, they discussed the possibilities of integrating their technologies, blending human ingenuity with alien precision. Marco and Jensen offered insights into the practicalities, while Alex and Lyra explored the conceptual framework. The conversation flowed naturally, the initial tension between them replaced by genuine curiosity and respect. When their discussion wound down, Lyra leaned back slightly, her expression more relaxed than Alex had ever seen. Your team functions more like a family than a formal unit. It's unusual. That's one way to put it, Marco said with a laugh. We've been working together for years. You learn to trust each other, even when you're not sure what's going to happen next. It's about shared experience, Alex added. When you've been through enough challenges together, you start to understand each other's strengths and weaknesses. You learn how to fill in the gaps. Lyra seemed to consider this for a moment. Perhaps there's something to be said for a less rigid approach. My people value structure and hierarchy, but I can see the benefits of your more fluid dynamic. Glad we could show you something new, Marco said, his tone light. You might even say we're growing on you. Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly, though her tone remained calm. Let's not get carried away. As they prepared to leave, Lyra addressed Alex directly. I'm interested in exploring this hybrid approach further. If you and your team are willing, I'd like to arrange a formal collaboration. Alex exchanged a glance with Marco and Jensen, both of whom nodded. We're definitely interested, Alex said. Let's make it happen. As Lyra departed, Marco leaned back in his chair, stretching. I never thought I'd see the day. Lyra, the queen of structure, actually willing to shake things up. Jensen smirked. She's coming around. Slowly, Alex smiled, feeling a new sense of camaraderie forming between their teams. Well, let's not waste the opportunity. We've got work to do. Chapter 8: Unity and Understanding. The last day of the expo was marked by an air of celebration. Delegates and attendees wandered through the halls, chatting amiably, exchanging data slates, and marveling at the technological displays. Alex, Marco, and Jensen stood by their booth one final time, finishing up a round of demonstrations for a small crowd. Well, Marco said, folding his arms, this has been a ride, hasn't it? Alex smirked. That's one way to put it. More like a crash course in interspecies diplomacy, Jensen added, adjusting his glasses. But we've learned a lot. Their conversation was interrupted by Lyra's arrival. She approached with her usual confident stride, but there was a new ease in her expression, as if the walls between them had finally come down. She stopped just short of their booth and gestured to a small box in her hand. "I thought it would be appropriate to end our time here with a gesture of goodwill," Lyra said, presenting the box. "A gift." Marco raised an eyebrow. "A gift? For us?" "For your team," Lyra clarified. She opened the box to reveal a set of finely crafted components. Alien materials they had never seen before. "These are advanced conductivity modules. They may help you refine your energy transfer system." Jensen's eyes lit up. "These could reduce energy loss by half. That's incredible." Alex looked from the components to Lyra. "Thank you. This means a lot." Lyra inclined her head slightly. "Consider it a token of respect. Your device and your methods have shown us new possibilities. I hope you'll continue to develop them, and perhaps we can integrate these ideas into our own systems." Marco grinned. "Sounds like someone's starting to appreciate our chaotic ways." Lyra smirked. "I still prefer order, but I now understand that there is strength in adaptability. And in collaboration." They all shook hands, a simple gesture that carried far more significance than any speech or presentation. As they talked, other delegates stopped by to exchange contact information, proposing future projects and joint research efforts. The atmosphere was one of optimism, a stark contrast to the wary skepticism that had marked the expo's first days. Later, as the halls began to empty and the displays were packed away, Alex and his team walked through the quieting venue. Lyra joined them, walking alongside Alex, her tone thoughtful. "It's strange," she said, "how quickly perceptions can change. When we first arrived, I dismissed your technology. I thought of humanity as inexperienced, unrefined. And now, I find myself intrigued." "We're not perfect," Alex said, "but we've had to learn to adapt. I think that's why we keep surprising people." Lyra glanced at him. "Surprising me, certainly. But more than that, you've challenged the way I think about innovation. It's not just about perfecting what we know. It's about exploring what we don't." Marco chimed in from behind. "Sounds like you're starting to get what makes us tick." Jensen nodded. "It's that constant push to try something new, even if it's messy." Lyra smiled faintly. "And that willingness to take risks, calculated risks, is what sets you apart. Perhaps it's something my people need to consider more seriously." They walked in silence for a moment, the only sound the echo of their footsteps in the now nearly empty expo hall. Alex looked around at the banners being taken down, the equipment being carefully packed away. The event was ending, but something else was just beginning. "So what happens next?" Alex asked. Lyra stopped and turned to him. "We keep working. We take what we've learned here and apply it. My team will return to our homeworld, and I will push for more open collaboration with your people." "And us?" Marco asked. "What should we do?" "Continue what you're doing," Lyra said. "Innovate. Challenge us. Make us see what we might have overlooked. And when the time is right, we'll work together again." Jensen smiled. "I like the sound of that." As they reached the exit, Lyra extended her hand to Alex one last time. "It has been an enlightening experience. I look forward to seeing what your team creates next." Alex took her hand, shaking it firmly. "And I look forward to working together again. We still have a lot to learn from each other." They parted ways, Lyra joining her delegation as they prepared to leave the expo grounds. Alex, Marco, and Jensen watched her go, each reflecting on how much had changed in just a few days. "Well," Marco said, breaking the silence, "I think that went better than expected." Jensen nodded. "More than better. We didn't just prove our tech works. We proved we can collaborate on an entirely new level." Alex smiled. "And we're just getting started."